Meets World's main cast changed a lot throughout its 7-year run. This means that sometimes important characters were forgotten or disappeared, like Minkus, Frankie, and Joey. However, I want to talk about one character who was only on the show for a short time, and while he was a member of the main cast, he was barely utilized during his time on the show. However, he had way more potential than what they used him for. Over its 7 seasons, Boy Meets World only had 6 characters who were a member of the main cast throughout the entire run. And that may not sound like that small of an amount. Friends had a main cast of only 6 throughout its 10-year run. However, the number becomes more shocking once you realize that the show has had 14 different main characters and 15 different main cast members. Almost every season adds a new character into the main cast, and most times they ended up being a popular character who stayed until the end of the show, or at least for a while, like Angela, Jack, Mr. Turner. However, this was not one of those times. Mr. Williams was a new addition to the show in Season 3 as a media arts teacher, which was a good idea for a character in this show, as filmmaking is a recurring theme before this season and continued to be in and after this season. Mr. Williams and Topanga were on the same level of importance this season, in which their actors' names appeared in only the opening credits of the episodes they appear in, while all the other characters have their actors' names listed whether they appear in the episode or not, and they both only appear in 17 out of the season's 22 episodes. However, unlike Topanga, who felt extremely utilized in this season, as in this season alone, her and Corey get together, break up, and get back together, Mr. Williams felt like he wasn't really utilized at all. Even in the episodes he appears in, it's very rare that he feels important to the plot. In a lot of episodes, he's not very plot relevant at all. So, it's fair to say he didn't do much, but that's not the character's fault, because he was actually an interesting and funny character, and deserved to be used a lot more than he was. He had a lot of good and interesting things going for him. One important aspect of his character is that he teaches film classes and used to work at a news station. This brings in some interesting stories and themes about working in TV and telling the truth in news, mainly in Truth and Consequences, Stormy Weather, and The Pink Flamingo Kid. For example, Truth and Consequences tells an interesting story where Corey reveals that janitor Bud has been leaving work early, leading to him getting fired, and it leads to a divide where some people believe that he was right for telling the story, and others believe that he shouldn't have told the story because janitor Bud got fired due to it.
What do you guys think? Was I right or wrong?
Well, I think it's obvious. You were right.
Wrong.
And that's an interesting story, and having a character teaching media arts who worked in a news station definitely helps to tell that story. He's not even that important in the episode. However, his character does bring an interesting plot to the show in a natural way, unlike Season 5's Boy Meets Real World, where the whole documentary aspect just comes into play because Mr. Feeney now has a film class that never was mentioned beforehand and is never mentioned again. However, these are some of the few times they actually decide to use him in the story. Unfortunately, in most episodes, he's usually only there in a subplot, usually only for a few scenes and only with a few lines. But when they use him in stories, it's usually pretty interesting and unique. However, my favorite aspect of him is his relationship with Mr. Turner. Most episodes that don't focus on TV but still involve him in the plot focus on this relationship, as they're usually together in subplots in episodes like What I Meant to Say, Train of Fools, and New Friends and Old. And they have a very good relationship that leads to very funny and charming interactions. It's the kind of relationship where you can tell they've been friends for so long, because a lot of times they insult each other, but in a very joking and friendly way, where you can tell they've been friends for a very long time.
When they kick you out of your apartment, you'll always have a place to stay.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That park across the street, man. And they got new benches, and we'd still be neighbors.
On top of that, it's also fun when he has interactions with Mr. Feeney, especially when they have scenes between all three of the teachers in episodes like The Last Temptation of Corey and The Grass is Always Greener. However, while he does have pretty good and interesting relationships with the teachers, his relationships with the students are not very prominent. Aside from Corey and Eric, he doesn't have much interaction with any other students. And even his interactions with them aren't super frequent. He has occasional interactions with characters like Sean and Topanga, but they're rare. But I feel like if he returned for later seasons, he could have formed interesting and unique relationships with all the characters. I feel like a big reason he didn't appear much after this season was his lack of story presence in the show. But that's due to the writing of the episodes as opposed to the character. I remember watching I Was a Teenage Spy and being interested upon the reveal that he was the wise man, because it was an interesting use of his character that actually would give him something to do. But then they revealed that he isn't actually the wise man and he's actually just a character with only a few lines.
Wait a minute, you're the wise man?
Well, I am clearly the hemp cat. Now that there is the wise man.
Horrific. He doesn't have a single episode or even a subplot where he's the star. He sometimes stars in subplots with other characters and occasionally gets a decent-sized role in the main plot, but in only a few episodes. But aside from that, it usually just feels like they threw him into a lot of episodes because they were paying the actor, and not because they had an idea for a story involving him. In episodes like City Slackers and A Kiss Is More Than a Kiss, where he just comes into Eric's subplot to say a few lines and not really add anything to the story. I feel like his history with TV and his friendship with Mr. Turner could have led to more interesting storylines and more prominence than what they gave him. He also had potential for comedy, as he did have some funny moments.
Hunter, Matthews, wake up. We gotta watch your report? You gotta watch it.
But it stinks. Maybe Mr. Williams doesn't know it stinks.
Oh, he knows.
Especially with Mr. Turner.
Break it up! Get back to class now! Hunter Matthews?
Did you guys know you were fighting each other?
However, I feel like they could have given him more funny lines than they did. But I feel like he did still have some, and it showed that the writers were able to give him funny lines, and the actor was able to deliver them in a good, funny way. I feel like if they used him more this season, he could have lasted at least another season. However, I feel that another part of the reason he was written out of the show was due to Mr. Turner's extreme lack of presence in the next season, and eventual disappearance, because it wouldn't make much sense to have him without Mr. Turner. But I feel like if they kept Mr. Williams around, they could have kept Mr. Turner around too, because having plots between them did lead to some interesting storylines, and I feel like that could have given them more ideas for what to do with Mr. Turner for another season, if they give him Mr. Williams to bounce off of. But I still feel the biggest reason Mr. Williams didn't appear next season wasn't Mr. Turner's slow disappearance, it was just how little he was used in this season. Due to this, they probably didn't think he had much story potential. But I feel like the character did have story potential. They just didn't give him a chance, as he didn't get a single spotlight episode, which Mr. Feeney and Mr. Turner both had. He didn't even get an episode where him and Mr. Turner starred together, which Mr. Feeney and Mr. Turner have gotten in episodes like Me and Mr. Joad. He didn't get any sort of starring role. He just got small roles throughout the season, and then next season he was gone and never appeared or was even mentioned again. The closest he got to that was appearing in 1 or 2 flashbacks in the final episode. Aside from that, he didn't appear or even get mentioned in the rest of the show, not even the graduation episode, which had appearances from Minkus, Frankie, and Joey, and even a mention of Mr. Turner.
Hey, Mr. Turner, wait up.
His character didn't get any sort of proper goodbye or departure, but most characters who disappeared from the show didn't. The closest things you can consider proper departures for important characters like Minkus and Mr. Turner is Minkus disappearing at the end of season 1, seemingly to the other side of the school, and Mr. Turner ending up in the hospital, but then they say he's gonna be okay, but he never appears again aside from one mention, and the mention's just a quick joke.
Hey, Mr. Turner, wait up.
I don't even know what the continuity is in this show at some points. But anyway, after this season, Mr. Williams' name is never mentioned again. And in season 5 of the show, there was another episode about Corey making a film. And in this episode, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Feeney taught a film class. So, I guess Mr. Williams was just fired. The end.